The U.S. has kicked off an effort to guide ships out of the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump says the U.S. will only help vessels from countries that are not involved in the war with Iran. He called the move a humanitarian gesture and warned Tehran not to interfere. Iran's military, though, says U.S. forces will be attacked if they enter the strait. The standoff continues to raise the amount that you are all paying at the pump. Take a look at this. An average gallon of regular gas will cost you $4.46. That's up almost 50% since the war began. Director of the White House National Economic Council, that's Kevin Hassett, addressed rising prices on Face the Nation.
If people look at their gas bills, of course, they're higher, and we're doing everything we can to make the temporary increase as small as possible.
President Trump says he's reviewing a 14-point plan from Tehran to end the war. Last week, he told congressional leaders hostilities have terminated, and this weekend, Mr. Trump denied he needed lawmakers' approval for the conflict.
Many presidents have been involved in things that are very big. They never had to go through anything with respect to Congress. They considered it to be totally unconstitutional. And the Democrats in Congress that push this, and probably a couple of Republicans, they're hurting our negotiating ability.
All right, we've got team coverage on all of this for you this Monday morning. Aaron Navarro is covering the president's response to the conflict. But let's begin with CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio standing by in our London bureau. Good morning, Ramy. Great to see you. What does the situation in the Strait of Hormuz look like right now this Monday morning?
Right, Errol, good morning. Well, in the past hour or so, there's been some confusion about Iranian state media reporting that Iran struck a U.S. warship, hitting it with 2 missiles. But we have just gotten word from U.S. CENTCOM, attributable to Tim Hawkins, the spokesperson for CENTCOM, saying, quote, not true. Just those 2 words there. But earlier in the past hour or so, Iran had said that this had happened, that missiles had hit a warship trying to pass through the strait. If that had happened, that would have been the first time that a U.S. naval vessel would have been hit in this war in these waters. And it may be due to what also Iranian state media released just a couple hours ago. The IRGC says that they control the waters here. Take a look at those 2 red lines, one on the west side, one on the east side. In the middle, the narrowest choke points of the Strait of Hormuz. They say they control all of these waters between these lines. And they say this in order to try to make sure that they are not challenged here. A spokesperson for the IRGC said that any ships that do violate Iran's protocols will be stopped with force. And just looking back, since this war started, Errol, 64 days ago now, there have been at least 40 incidents of Iranian attacks, Iranian seizures, near misses. This is coming from the UK maritime trade operations. In addition, we've been reporting over the weekend that at least 10 seafarers have been killed. That's coming from the United Nations. So there's a lot of concern, a lot of threat to safety here. And then as for peace talks, got to talk about that. Between the U.S. and Iran, the spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry just earlier this morning says that they have gotten a response from the U.S. to that 14-point peace plan you mentioned that they sent over last week, that they're reviewing it. He also said that the U.S. has a hard time quitting what it's called maximalist demands, and that they're only talking about ending the war. But again, what President Trump, what his cabinet want on the table is ending Iran's nuclear program. But again, Iran's spokesperson for its foreign ministry saying that there's nothing about that on the table. That's how it stands right now.
All right, a complicated picture at the moment. Ramy, thank you. Let's jump now to CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro in our Washington bureau. Aaron, good morning. Explain the president's reasoning for having the U.S. guide ships through the strait at this point in the conflict. Clearly, the U.S. would expect it would attract Iran's frustration and perhaps a strike.
Errol, good morning, and we have certainly seen that frustration, at least in public statements from Iran. But in a long post over the weekend, President Trump says that this came at the request of other countries not involved in the war. Ramy mentioned some of the numbers when it comes to the strait, but at this moment, there are about 2,000 ships with about 20,000 working personnel that have been stranded in the strait since the beginning of this conflict. President Trump framed this operation, which he has called, quote, Project Freedom, as one to free up countries that have done nothing wrong. He called them victims of circumstance and said it was a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the United States, Middle Eastern countries, but in particular, the country of Iran. He noted how many ships could be running low on food and maybe reaching unsanitary conditions as we get closer to 10 weeks now of this war. And Iran has only spoken out against this, saying that the Strait, quote, would not be managed by Trump's delusional posts and warning that U.S. forces would be attacked if they enter the Strait of Hormuz. And they've claimed that, though CENTCOM, as Ramy mentioned, denies that that was the case.
And this moment is key, Aaron, because we're now past the 60-day deadline for the White House to get congressional approval for this ongoing war. The administration claims the ceasefire paused that clock, but what are you hearing?
That's right. That deadline was last Friday, and the president told Republican leaders in a letter in Congress that the hostilities have been, quote, terminated, in his words, saying in that letter that there has been no exchange of fire between the U.S. and Iran since April 7, since that first ceasefire began. Now, that 60-day clock was meant to limit the military campaigns ordered by the executive branch, but were not authorized by Congress. Despite the president's reasoning, though, Democrats argue Congress has to step in here. This is what Congressman Jason Crow said on Face the Nation yesterday.
And somebody has to say, enough is enough. Somebody has to step up and say, we're just not going to do it. And a president that hasn't told us what the strategy is, hasn't come to Congress for authorization, hasn't even articulated to the American people what he's trying to accomplish, I am not going to write blank checks to have that cycle continue.
Now, despite the ongoing ceasefire, the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports is still considered an act of war, and Trump has kept the option for more strikes open and ready. It's worth noting, though, other administrations have skirted around the war powers resolution in the past, and Congress has never successfully used it to end the military campaign.
All right, Aaron Navarro with the latest from our D.C. bureau. Aaron, thanks.